Making movies. It's a pretty incredible experience. The collaborative nature of all these different artistic and technical disciplines coming together, combining their creative forces to make magic. Incredible as movie making may be, it's also a lot of hard work. It can be downright stressful at times, even dangerous. And for the tragic few over the decades, it also proved to be deadly. Join us today as we remember those who died to make a movie.
Safety standards and protocols have come a long way since the nascent days of early cinema, which was something of a Wild West where filmmakers could ask just about anything of cast and crew to get the shot. And before the era of modern computer-generated effects, if the director needed something spectacular like a daring maneuver in an airplane, a catastrophic flood, or a wild car crash in their film, they had to actually do those things for real to capture in the camera. Audiences wouldn't settle if it looked fake. The thrill was in the perception of real danger. Some actors of the era, like Buster Keaton, built their careers out of doing these death-defying stunts. But this led to loads of accidents as the movies grew up, which over the decades prompted safety standards and protocols to be implemented. But even with safety standards in place, no matter how much planning and preparation, sometimes things just go wrong. And not just while making movies, but also television and any other kind of production. Stunt workers are at the most risk, who literally put their lives and limbs on the line to entertain us. Just last year, in 2025, the Motion Picture Academy announced that they will finally add a Best Stunts category to the Oscars at the 100th Academy Awards in 2028, giving these brave and sometimes battered folks the long overdue recognition they deserve. So it felt like a good time for us to honor them as well, particularly those who lost their lives in the process. And while stunt performers are at greatest risk, others behind the camera, crew, extras, and even the stars themselves are not immune. These are folks who were either on set, on location, or working in the service of a production when they lost their lives. We'll begin our journey back in the early silent era, that Wild West of movie making. Colorado is where we'll land to tell the story of the first known instances of fatalities on a movie set in the US. Across the border is a 1914 silent Western film produced by the Colorado Motion Picture Company, which centered around the Mexican Revolution. The star of the film was a promising young actress named Grace McHugh, who played Anita. Filming had essentially completed in June of 1914, but a reshoot was requested in July. In this scene, Grace was crossing a river on horseback. The horse lost its footing and reared up, throwing Grace into the swift currents of the Arkansas River. A camera operator filming nearby was a strong swimmer and dove in to try and rescue Grace. He managed to reach her and pull her toward the shore. However, the sandbar they reached turned out to be quicksand. Both would drown. Grace was only around 16 at the time. Her body was recovered 2 weeks later, 9 miles downstream. She rests here at Golden Cemetery in Golden, Colorado. The brave cameraman who attempted to rescue Grace was named Owen Carter. He had worked the camera on a number of short films in 1914. Owen didn't hesitate when he saw Grace in trouble, and for his heroic efforts, he was posthumously awarded a Carnegie Medal. Owen's body was recovered about a mile from where the two were last seen. He was 29. We find Owen's resting place here at Fairmount Cemetery in Denver. In the August 1914 issue of the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, they declared Across the Border as having the most tragic film production in history at that time. Sadly, the film these two lost their lives making is lost. For early filmmakers and movie-going audiences, aerial spectacle was one of the most exciting facets of motion pictures. It was also the most dangerous. The First World War would produce numerous talented daredevil and stunt pilots who, after the war, used their skills to entertain in air shows and on film. One of the most renowned stunt pilots of the early 20th century was Ormer Locklear. He became a celebrity in his Locklear flying circus air shows, known for walking out onto the wings or hanging from the axles mid-flight. As aviation's foremost stuntman in the world, Hollywood soon came calling. Universal signed Locklear to star in the 1919 film The Great Air Robbery, making him cinema's first aviation star. Then in 1920, he was signed to star in Fox's The Skyway Man. Stunts would include wing walking and toppling a church steeple with his plane. The last stunt scheduled for filming was a nighttime spinning dive. Large crowds gathered to watch the spectacle, unaware of the tragedy they would witness. Bright studio floodlights were used to illuminate the plane at night, and these were to be turned off once a certain altitude was reached to signal to Locklear when to pull out of the dive. The lights were never turned off, momentarily blinding the pilots, and Locklear did not pull out of the dive in time before crashing. He died on impact at just 28. His co-pilot Milton Elliott also perished. The film was released with the footage of the fatal crash included, making The Skyway Man the first known film to include on-screen deaths. Like Across the Border, The Skyway Man is a lost film, with no known footage existing. Ormer rests here at Greenwood Memorial Park in Fort Worth, Texas. We've landed now back in Los Angeles and Calvary Cemetery in East LA. The 1923 film serial The Eagle's Talons was touted as one of the best stunt serials ever filmed. Among those performing stunts in the film was a man known as Daredevil, Gene Perkins. He appeared in films like Do or Die and The Hazards of Helen. In 1922, he was filming stunts for The Eagle's Talons. In one scene, Gene was transferring from a rope ladder hanging from a plane onto the top of a moving train. Due to air turbulence, the plane came in at an awkward angle, and Gene, hanging from the ladder, struck the side of the train, breaking his ribs. No longer able to hold on to the ladder, he fell to his death. Gene was 29. The Eagle's Talons is also lost. Let's cross back to the East Coast and spend a little time in the magnificent Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. Quite a few famous folks rest here. Among them is an actress of stage and early film named Martha Mansfield. She was a rising star of this era, appearing alongside Edmund Lowe and Bela Lugosi in The Silent Command, and John Barrymore in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But her life and career were cut tragically short on location in San Antonio, Texas, filming The Warrens of Virginia. She was wearing an ornate Civil War costume with hoop skirts and flimsy ruffles. After she finished her scenes, she retired to her car when suddenly her skirt caught fire from a discarded match. Despite efforts to extinguish the flames, Martha was badly burned and died from her injuries the following day. She was just 24. The Warrens of Virginia is also a lost film. Back to LA, this is Inglewood Park Cemetery. Chick Morrison was an actor who appeared in more than 60 productions during the silent era, including numerous Bronco Billy films and 1921's Black Beauty. Chick was particularly skilled as a horseman and trainer. His career came to a tragic end while filming at Hal Roach Studios in Los Angeles, when his favorite horse, Young Steamboat, fell backwards on him, killing him instantly at the age of 46. Much has been speculated about the epic chariot race in 1925's Ben-Hur, as well as the one in the 1959 remake, with rumors that someone died in the chariot race and the incident can be seen in the film. In the 1925 version, early attempts at filming the chariot race were done in Rome. However, these are not the shots in the movie, which were done in Los Angeles. According to star Francis X. Bushman, at the shoot in Rome, he said, "During one take, we went around the curve and the wheel broke on the other fellow's chariot. The hub hit the ground and the guy shot up into the air about 30 feet. It was like a slow-motion film. He fell on a pile of lumber and died of internal injuries." The identity of this individual is not known, and the incident was not included in the film. In the 1959 version of the chariot race, Charlton Heston's stunt double was a man named Joe Kenneth, legendary stuntman Yakima Kenneth's son. In an unplanned and near-fatal incident, Joe was tossed flying in the air. He came down hard but suffered just a minor chin injury. To integrate the moment into the film, a shot was devised on set to show Heston recovering from the mishap in close-up. There were no human fatalities in this chariot race. Dummies were used for the trampling moments. And unlike the 1925 version, which reported numerous horse fatalities, Yakima Kenneth was brought on in 1959 to ensure the safety of the horses. There were no horse fatalities during the filming of the latter version. This is the Chapel Columbarium at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Along the east wall is the niche and urn of an actor named Gordon Standing. He appeared in close to a dozen films during the silent era. Among them was 1927's The King of the Jungle, which starred Elmo Lincoln, the first actor to play Tarzan. In March 1927, Gordon was on set when he was mauled to death by a lion that had broken loose on the set. Gordon was 39. The incident left Elmo Lincoln so shaken, he retired from acting for an entire decade. The film is considered lost, with only a trailer remaining. The Trail of 98 is an action-adventure film starring Ralph Forbes and Dolores Del Rio about the Klondike Gold Rush. In July 1927, while filming a rapids sequence in the Copper River in Alaska, 8 stuntmen in 2 boats attempted to navigate these treacherous waters. In doing so, several stuntmen ended up in the water and drowned, including Joseph, sometimes cited as Jerome, Boughton, Red Thompson, and Howard Daughters. Boughton lost his life trying to save Daughters and Thompson, whose bodies were never recovered. Boughton was recovered, though his resting place is unknown. In 1928, Warner Brothers made a movie about Noah's Ark. Approximately 7,500 extras worked on the film. And for the cinematic flood scene, some 600,000 gallons of water were released. The amount of water was so overwhelming that 3 extras drowned. One was so badly injured his leg needed to be amputated, and numerous others suffered injuries and pneumonia, including star Dolores Costello. In later years, she expressed the horrors of working on this film, calling it mud, blood, and flood. The deaths led to the introduction of some of the first film safety regulations the following year. This is the Great Mausoleum at Forest Lawn, Glendale, Hollywood's very own cathedral for the dead. Heading into these quiet halls, we reach the Dahlia Terrace. Near the end of the Daffodil Corridor is the crypt of Alvin Knechtel. He was a cinematographer in early Hollywood, the person who captures the director's vision in the camera. His films include The Leech, Synthetic Sin, and The Great Divide. In 1929, Alvin was hired to film The Aviator. On July 17, 1929, he was flying in a plane scouting locations for a scene they were about to shoot. Alvin and the pilot were killed when the plane crashed. He was 28. His marker here is a distinctive reference to his work and final film. The Aviator is a lost film. By the 1930s, aviation films were a hot-ticket item. One of the biggest to usher in the decade was the 1930 film Hell's Angels, produced and directed by Howard Hughes. It starred Jean Harlow and Ben Lyon, and culminates in an epic aerial dogfight. 3 pilots and a mechanic were killed during the production of Hell's Angels. Pilot Clement Phillips died when his plane crashed in Hayward, California, while delivering an SC-5 fighter to the shooting location. He was just 28 at the time. Clement is laid to rest at Forest Hill Cemetery in Madison, Wisconsin. Phil Jones was a mechanic on the shoot. He was in the back of a plane piloted by Al Wilson, simulating smoke as the plane was put into a spin. The two were to bail out at a certain point before the plane crashed. Al signaled the bailout, but Jones did not hear him, and he went down with the plane. He was 30 and rests here in Sunrise Slope at Forest Lawn, Glendale. Rupert McAllister was an Australian pilot who died during production. He's laid to rest back in his native Australia. Pilot Al Johnson ran into tension wires and crashed while landing in Van Nuys, where much of the filming took place. Even the director Howard Hughes was badly injured when he personally piloted a low-altitude aerial maneuver after the professional stuntmen told him it could not be done safely or successfully. They were proven right after Hughes crashed. He survived, suffering severe injuries. Such Men Are Dangerous is a 1930 film directed by Kenneth Hawks, Howard Hawks' brother. Filming would wrap in what was described as the worst air accident in film history. On January 2, 1930, after filming had completed, Kenneth Hawks called for a series of retakes of some aerial shots with which he was dissatisfied. 3 airplanes carrying cast and crew flew out off Redondo Beach in Santa Monica. 2 with the film crew and 1 to film. The 2 planes carrying crew collided midair, burst into flames, and fell into the ocean off the Southern California coast. 10 people were killed in the accident, including director Kenneth Hawks, whose ashes were scattered at the site of the crash. Also among the dead was cinematographer Conrad Wells, real name Abraham Freed. We find his grave here at Home of Peace Cemetery in East LA. Conrad was also known for his work as cinematographer on films like The Skyhawk and The Woman from Hell. He was 29. Also among the dead was Max Gold, whose crypt we find in the Beth Olam Mausoleum at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. He was an early handball and basketball star in the US before transitioning to the movies in the 1920s, working as director or assistant director. He was the assistant director of Such Men Are Dangerous when he died at just 31. Others who perished on that day include cameramen George Eastman, Ben Frankel, and C. Otho Jordan, 2 property men, and 2 pilots. Only 5 of the 10 bodies were recovered. This is Berkeley Memorial Cemetery in Middletown, Rhode Island. This distinctive stone commemorates Varick Frissell. He was an up-and-coming filmmaker in the late silent, early sound eras. His magnum opus, his first feature, would also be his last. It was 1931's The Viking, notable for being the first sound film to record sound and dialogue on location with the use of magnetic wire recording. The production included a real sealing ship, the SS Viking. On March 15, 1931, the production crew was aboard the ship shooting additional footage off the coast of Newfoundland. The ship had dynamite aboard in case they needed to free themselves from ice, and also to use for practical explosions in the film. Somehow, the dynamite cache exploded, destroying the ship, killing 27 crew members, including director Varick Frissell and most of the film crew. The ship sank, and Varick's body was never recovered, so this is a cenotaph. To this day, the disaster remains the greatest loss of life during a film production. The incident was acknowledged in the opening of the film.
We hope and trust that you will find this, their picture, a worthy memorial.
Back to LA, let's visit the Great Mausoleum again. This is the Sanctuary of Fidelity in the Gardenia Terrace. Along the right wall, way up at the top, is the crypt of Jack Budlong. He was a stunt horse rider in the 1941 Errol Flynn film, They Died with Their Boots On. The title would have tragic foreshadowing for Mr. Budlong. While filming a charge scene, he insisted on using a real saber to lead the cavalry charge.
The greatest cavalry regiment the world has ever known, thundering to battle to the rousing tempo of their own fighting song, writing history with the flashing strokes of their sabers. Men who'd rather die with their boots on than see their flag crumpled in defeat, all under the flaming command of the man they'd follow straight to Hades.
As he rode alongside Flynn, his horse stumbled, possibly from a nearby explosion, and sent Jack flying. As he landed, he was impaled on his own sword. Jack was just 28 when he died. 2 additional stunt riders reportedly perished falling from their horses during the filming of this movie. In the shadows of the Great Mausoleum, we find the grave of Charles Murphy. He was an actor who had supporting roles in more than 140 films, usually bit parts in westerns like In Old California and Sheriff of Tombstone. Before that, he was an animal trainer and lion tamer in vaudeville and traveling circuses. While filming a scene in Bakersfield, California for the 1942 film Lost Canyon, a Hopalong Cassidy film, a wagon overturned and crushed Murphy. He died from his injuries at age 60. This is Los Angeles National Cemetery, where veterans are laid to rest and valor proudly sleeps. Heading into the columbarium, we find the niche of James P. Spencer. He was a Hawaiian-born actor, a supporting player in around 20 films, like Moonlight in Hawaii and Each Dawn I Die alongside James Cagney and George Raft. He was a regular feature in Hollywood's South Sea Island films in the 40s. But in a freak accident in 1943, Mr. Spencer was working at MGM Studios when a large light fell 40 feet and struck him, killing him. He was 50. Our next stop on our journey today takes us into one of the gardens of memory at Forest Lawn, Glendale. Here lies Addison Jack Randall. He was a Western actor in the 30s and 40s, starring in films like Trigger Smith and Wild Horse Range. Jack died unexpectedly in 1945 while filming a serial called The Royal Mounted Rides Again. He reportedly fell from a horse he was riding and struck a tree. There are conflicting accounts as to what led to the fall, some saying it resulted from an attempt to reach down and retrieve a fallen hat, others stating he suffered a heart attack before the fall. Jack was 39. This lakeside view is the Garden of Legends at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Among the legends resting here is matinee idol Tyrone Power. He was one of Hollywood's biggest stars in the 30s and 40s, often playing romantic leads in swashbuckling and historic epics. His films include The Mark of Zorro, Blood and Sand, Prince of Foxes, and more. In November 1958, Tyrone was in Spain shooting the biblical epic Solomon and Sheba, playing Solomon to Gina Lollobrigida's Sheba. About 2/3 of the movie had been shot by that point. Tyrone was filming an intense dueling scene when he dropped his sword, complaining of pain in his left arm. Tyrone died a short time later, having suffered a heart attack on set. He was just 44. Production of the film was halted, and his role had to be recast. Yul Brynner would take on the role of Solomon in Tyrone's place. We're at Valhalla Memorial Park now in North Hollywood. Right near the fountain, currently dry during renovations, is an actor and stuntman named Fred Kennedy. He was a regular collaborator of John Ford and John Wayne in films like Rio Grande, Hondo, and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. In December 1958, he was doing stunts in Louisiana for the 1959 film The Horse Soldiers. While performing a saddle fall, Kennedy broke his neck, passing away a short time later. Kennedy was close with director John Ford, who was so distraught over his friend's death, he shut down production. and postponed completion of the film, changing the end of the script in response. Kennedy's saddle fall was kept in the final film. He was 48. This is Pacific View Memorial Park in Orange County, California, aptly named for its wonderful view of the Pacific and Catalina Island off in the distance. Another of Hollywood's most renowned stunt pilots was Paul Mantz. He thrilled audiences in dozens of films from Hell's Angels to 12 O'Clock High, and even the comedy It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. He described himself not as a stunt pilot, but as a precision pilot. In 1965, he was filming stunts for the Jimmy Stewart film The Flight of the Phoenix. For the Phoenix's takeoff, Mantz was asked to do a touch-and-go landing in which he came in low, skimmed the ground, and took off again. On the second take, as the landing gear made contact with the ground, the plane's aft boom fractured, causing the aircraft to break up and nose into the ground, killing Mantz instantly. He was 61. The credits of The Flight of the Phoenix ended with a tribute to Mantz, saying, "It should be remembered that Paul Mantz, a fine man and a brilliant flyer, gave his life in the making of this film." Catch-22 is a 1970 dark comedy with an ensemble cast, including Alan Arkin, Bob Newhart, Martin Sheen, John Voight, Orson Welles, Anthony Perkins, and more. Working on the film as a second unit director was John Jordan, who had previously worked as an aerial cameraman on films like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and You Only Live Twice. In May 1969, John was shooting from a plane over the ocean. He refused to wear a harness during a bomber sequence and fell or was sucked out of the open tail turret. He fell 4,000 feet to the ocean below. His body was never recovered. John was 44. One of the great World War II films is 1970's Tora Tora Tora. That brings us to this uniquely scenic cemetery in Honolulu, Hawaii, National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific. The cemetery is built right into a dormant volcanic crater. It's known as the Punch Bowl. Resting in these beautiful grounds is Guy Thomas Strong. He was a U.S. Navy pilot who worked with the filmmakers to shoot aerial scenes for Tora Tora Tora, which depicts the events at Pearl Harbor. During aerial rehearsals in Oahu, Guy was flying a plane modified to resemble a Japanese dive bomber. The plane crashed into a sugarcane field. Guy was 35. This Spanish California-inspired mausoleum is found at Woodlawn Cemetery in Santa Monica. Resting in the Library of Living Memories is the urn of Janos Prohaska. Janos was an actor and stunt performer known particularly for his work playing costumed animals and creatures. If there was an actor performing in a creature suit on television in the 60s, there's a good chance it was Janos. Some of his creatures are displayed here in his niche, seen on shows like Star Trek, Gilligan's Island, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, and more. He particularly specialized in apes. In 1974, Janos was working on the TV series Primal Man. He and several members of the crew were aboard a chartered plane in Central California returning from filming when the plane crashed, killing all 36 on board. With him was his son, Robert, also a stunt performer on the show, though Robert's ashes don't appear to be here with his parents. The cause of the crash was never determined. Janos was 54. Back to Hollywood, we reach Forest Lawn in the Hollywood Hills. Here in the Enduring Faith section rests Vic Rivers. The stuntman was known particularly as a stunt driver on films like Grand Theft Auto and Live and Let Die. While working on the 1978 film High Riders, he performed a stunt where he drove his 1950 Ford F-100 off a bridge into a river on the Paramount Ranch. He managed to exit the vehicle in the river, but passed out and drowned before assistance could reach him. Vic was 29. Eternal Valley Memorial Park is located about 20 miles north of Hollywood, outside Santa Clarita. Here lies another brave stunt performer gone too soon. Jim Sheppard acted and did stunts for films and television, on shows like Gunsmoke and Star Trek, and movies like Planet of the Apes. In 1977, he was hired as Jason Robard's stunt double for the film Comes a Horseman. Filming the scenes where Robard's character is presumably dragged to his death, Jim was killed when his horse veered off course, causing him to hit his head on a fence post. He was 41. The scene was kept in the movie, but cut just before the fatal moment. We're in Oklahoma now, and Grand Army of the Republic Cemetery. Here lies actor Richard Kelton. He made appearances on shows like Gunsmoke, Charlie's Angels, The Incredible Hulk, and more. In 1978, he was cast as Ficus on the show Quark. Later that year, he was at Universal filming Centennial. While in his dressing room studying his lines, he was overcome by carbon monoxide poisoning due to poor ventilation in the room. Richard was 35. Our travels bring us back to Inglewood Park Cemetery, south of Hollywood. Between 1979 and 1985, The Dukes of Hazzard was one of the top-viewed television shows of the era, remembered particularly for those iconic car chases. One of the talented cameramen tasked with capturing those thrilling car chases on camera was Rodney Mitchell. He was one of the first black cameramen in the local union. Tragically, Rodney was killed and several other crew members injured when the camera truck they were filming a chase scene on rolled after hitting a soft shoulder on terrain that had become rutted after a period of rain. Rodney was 31. Years later, Dukes of Hazzard star John Schneider would address the accident, speaking highly of Rodney, and reiterating that it was not a dangerous or reckless stunt, but rather a tragic perfect storm of elements that led to the crash. This is Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills once again, in the Sheltering Hills section. Here lies Boris Sagal. He was known for his work as a director, particularly on television. He directed episodes of numerous popular shows like Peter Gunn, Mike Hammer, The Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Dr. Kildare, and more. He would be nominated for 4 Primetime Emmys. And if his surname is familiar to you, he is the father of Katie Sagal, of Married with Children fame. The tragic death of Boris came in 1981 while he was filming the miniseries World War III. Exiting a helicopter in the parking lot of a Timberline Lodge in Oregon, he accidentally turned the wrong way and walked into the spinning tail rotor blades of the helicopter. Boris was 57. Tacoma, Washington is our next stop. Heading into the Tacoma Mausoleum, we find the niche and urn of Jack Tyree. The actor and stunt performer did stunts on numerous notable films like Planet of the Apes, Escape from New York, and Blade Runner. In 1981, he was filming scenes for the 1982 film The Sword and the Sorcerer. While performing a high fall stunt at Griffith Park in Los Angeles, an approximate 78-foot fall, Tyree, weighed down by heavy costume and makeup, fell short of the airbag and died on impact. He was 37. The fall was included in the final film, but obviously not the impact. The film is dedicated to Jack. One of the most shocking and tragic instances of deaths on a movie set came out of the Twilight Zone. That brings us to Hillside Memorial Park in Culver City, south of Hollywood. This is the grave of actor Vic Morrow. He's remembered for films like God's Little Acre and The Bad News Bears. And on TV, he had a lead role in the 60s series Combat as Sergeant Saunders. In 1982, he was cast in the Twilight Zone movie, an anthology film. During the filming of the Time Out segment, Vic was carrying 2 child actors across a river in a simulated war zone. A real helicopter hovered above them as pyrotechnic effects exploded all around them. One special effects explosion was detonated too close to the helicopter, which caused it to spin out of control and crash. Tragically, Vic and the 2 children were below. All 3 were killed instantly. Vic was 53. The 2 child actors had been hired illegally, as California law prohibited child actors working at night. They were paid under the table, and the parents were never informed that their children would be anywhere near explosions and a real helicopter. Micah Dinley was just 7 years old. He was laid to rest here near the chapel at Forest Lawn Cypress in Orange County, California. The other child actor was Renee Chen. She was just 6 years old. We find her grave here in the Everlasting Love section of Forest Lawn, Glendale. The accident led to civil and criminal action against the filmmakers, which lasted nearly a decade. It also led to new safety standards to try and prevent an accident like this from ever happening again. When asked about the incident, Steven Spielberg, who was a producer on the film but did not direct this segment, said, "No movie is worth dying for. I think people are standing up much more now than ever before, to producers and directors who ask too much. If something isn't safe, it's the right and responsibility of every actor or crew member to yell, 'Cut.'" We're back in North Hollywood at Valhalla Memorial Park, near the portal of the Folded Wings. Jon-Erik Hexum was a star on the rise in the 80s. After finding success as a model, he made his way to television, playing Phineas Bogg on Voyagers. Then in 1984, he was cast in a co-starring role in the series Cover Up, playing Mac Harper, an undercover agent posing as a model. On set, during a break from shooting, Hexum became bored with filming delays. He began playing Russian roulette with a prop gun, which was actually a fully functional revolver. It was empty except for one blank cartridge. He jokingly spun the cylinder, held it to his head, and pulled the trigger, perhaps unaware of the force that even blanks can produce. The odds were 1 in 6, but the firing pin landed on the one chamber that held the blank, discharging it and generating enough force to fracture his skull. Jon-Erik suffered massive hemorrhaging, and despite being rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery, he did not survive. Jon-Erik was 26. His organs were donated and his body cremated. His ashes were scattered at sea, but years later, this marker was placed here in the Rose Garden as a memorial for family, friends, and fans to visit. The episode following his death ended with this dedication.
When a star dies, its light continues to shine across the universe for millenniums. Jon-Erik Hexum died in October of this year, but the lives he touched will continue to be brightened by his light forever and ever.
Turning west, we reach Valley Oaks Memorial Park in Westlake Village, about 30 miles west of Hollywood. Cliff Wenger Jr. was a special effects man, working on films like The Island of Dr. Moreau, Wanda, Nevada, and High Point. In 1984, he was in Mexico working special effects for the movie Rambo: First Blood Part 2. One of the film's explosions caused him to lose his footing and fall to his death. Cliff was reportedly submerged underwater for more than 5 minutes before the crew could reach him. He was 34, and the film is dedicated to him. We're back again at Eternal Valley Memorial Park. Just a few spaces away from stuntman Jim Sheppard, who we visited earlier, is another stunt performer, Reed Rondell. He worked on films like Private School, Risky Business, and St. Elmo's Fire in the 80s. Reed often worked with Tom Cruise as his double. In 1985, Reed was working on the TV series Airwolf as a double for Jan Michael Vincent. He was a passenger in a helicopter filming in the Pico Canyon area when the chopper crashed. The pilot survived, but Reed did not. He was just 22. His marker reads Stunts Unlimited, which is a stunt organization founded by Reed's father Ronnie, also a stuntman. Art Scholl was another of the great acrobatic pilots and aerial cameramen in the movies, working on classics like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Right Stuff, and more. So when it came time to make an action drama film about fighter pilots in training, Art was the man to call. The film was 1986's Top Gun. While filming a spinning out scene off the coast of Carlsbad, California, Scholl was unable to recover from the spin and pull up. His plane crashed into the ocean. Neither the aircraft nor his body were ever recovered. Art was 53, and Top Gun was dedicated to his memory. This is Murmuring Trees section of Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills. In from the road several rows is the world's most spectacular stuntman, Dar Robinson. He was known for being fearless in his stunts, particularly his high falls. He made a splash, pun intended, when he doubled for Steve McQueen in a 100-foot jump off a cliff into the sea for 1972's Papillon. His most amazing stunt was doubling for Christopher Plummer in the conclusion of High Point, where he fell 700 feet from the CN Tower in Toronto, with a concealed parachute deployed at the last second. The stunt earned him the largest salary at the time for a stuntman, $100,000. Dar's stunts were always well planned, and he never broke a bone in his Hollywood career. But in 1986, on the set of $1 Million Mystery, Robinson was filming a high-speed motorcycle run and overshot his braking point. He went over the cliff to his death. The last 3 films he worked on were dedicated to his memory: Cyclone, Lethal Weapon, and $1 Million Mystery. In 1987, a documentary was made about his life, The Ultimate Stuntman, a tribute to Dar Robinson. Crossing the country back to New York, this is Gate of Heaven Cemetery in Hawthorne, north of New York City. Here lies Victor Magnotta, an actor and stuntman in the 70s and 80s. He was good friends with Martin Scorsese, working on films like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. In 1987, he was working as a stunt coordinator on the Michael Keaton film The Squeeze. In a stunt gone wrong, Victor drove a vehicle off a Hoboken pier and plunged into the Hudson River. He was pinned in the car and was unable to escape before drowning. Victor was 43. We find ourselves once again back at Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills, this time in Revelation section. Up the hill a ways, we find a man named Benny Dobbins. He wore many hats in the movies, acting on shows like The Rockford Files and movies like Ruckus, or second unit directing films like Weird Science and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But he spent most of his time as a stuntman, coordinating or performing stunts on movies like Blazing Saddles, Planet of the Apes, and E.T. In 1988, he was filming stunts in Austria for the movie Red Heat. He suffered a fatal heart attack while coordinating a fight scene in freezing, snowy conditions. Benny was 55. Not far from here is Morning Light section. Delta Force 2, The Colombian Connection is a 1990 film starring Chuck Norris. While filming in the Philippines, 5 people were killed when a helicopter carrying cast and crew crashed. Among the dead was actor and stuntman Jeff Brewer, who played Major Anderson in the film. He was 30. Other fatalities include gaffers Don Marshall and Mike Graham, cameraman Gadi Danzig, and pilot Jojo Imperial. The movie was dedicated to their memory. Jeff did stunts for other films including Overboard, Midnight Run, and Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Back again to Forest Lawn Cypress in Orange County, this is Eternal Peace section. Here rests H.B. Toby Halicki. He was a filmmaker and stunt driver known for writing, directing, producing, and starring in the 1974 film Gone in 60 Seconds. The film is known for being done mostly guerrilla style and having damaged or destroyed some 127 cars in the production of the film. The popularity of Gone in 60 Seconds led to a remake in 2000 starring Nicolas Cage and Angelina Jolie. In 1989, Halicki began production on a sequel, Gone in 60 Seconds 2. In another tragic incident on a film set, Halicki was preparing for a dramatic stunt sequence when a cable holding up a water tower snapped, knocking over a telephone pole, which toppled and killed Halicki. He was 48, and the film was scrapped due to the incident. We make our second trip of the day to Washington State to reach Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle. Many of you know that this is where Bruce and Brandon Lee rest. Brandon followed in his famous father's footsteps, becoming an actor and martial artist. He began appearing in films in the 80s, and in 1994 landed the role for which he is best known today, that of Eric Draven in The Crow. But tragedy would strike in 1993 near the end of filming. In a scene where his character was to be shot, the prop gun unknowingly had a squib load in the barrel. When the gun fired with the blank rounds, the force was enough to dislodge the squib and fire it at Brandon like a real bullet. He was struck in the abdomen. Cast and crew had no idea what had happened as Brandon lost consciousness on the floor. He was rushed to the hospital where he died at just 28. The shooting was ruled accidental due to negligence. The Crow was completed with doubles and visual effects and is dedicated to Brandon. This is God's Acre at Forest Lawn, Hollywood. Here lies Sonia Davis. She was a stunt performer in movies like Live Wire, Class Act, and Time Cop. In 1994, she was hired as Angela Bassett's stunt double for the movie Vampire in Brooklyn. One day of shooting, she invited her mother and siblings to set to watch her work. Sonia's mother recalled her daughter expressing doubt over a particular stunt. She said, "The last words I heard my baby say was when she yelled down to the stunt coordinator, 'Are you sure?'" Sonia did a 42-foot backward fall, but somehow the stunt went wrong. She struck a wall and missed the airbag, much to her family's horror. Sonia died from her injuries at 32, and her family brought a wrongful death lawsuit against the studio. Southeast of Fresno, California is Visalia Public Cemetery. Here lies Janet Wilder. She was a stunt performer who worked on films like 9 Months and Black Sheep. In December 1995, she was working as a stunt woman in Florida for the film Gone Fishin'. Janet and her husband were portraying a couple watching a boat fly off a ramp. The boat made the jump, but overshot the landing at the wrong angle and overturned, landing into the set where film crew and extras were. The boat struck Janet, killing her. She was 29. Her husband and several others were also injured in the accident. We're back at Valley Oaks Memorial Park in Westlake Village, just a few spaces away, actually, from Cliff Wenger, who we visited earlier. Meet Matthew Gordy. He worked as an electrician on movie sets, a grip as they're known. He worked on films like Mortal Kombat and Spy Hard. In 1998, Matthew was working on the Disney film Dinosaur. He was electrocuted when a boom he was working on came in contact with high-voltage power lines. Matthew was 31. The new millennium brings us to the Great White North, Canada, and Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Toronto. Under a blanket of snow rests Chris Lamon. The actor and stuntman worked on films like The Boondock Saints and Angel Eyes. In 2000, he was doing stunts in Toronto for the film Exit Wounds. In the scene, a van was being towed along a street upside down as part of a chase scene. Chris was supposed to roll out safely, but in the process, struck his head. He died days later from his injuries at 35. We've explored tragedies while making movies and television shows. Let's take a moment now to remember a tragic accident in the production of a music video. This is Rosewood Mausoleum at Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York. In the late 90s, early 2000s, Aaliyah was a rising star in both the music and film worlds. She was dubbed the Princess of R&B with hit songs like Try Again and One in a Million. And she starred in films like Romeo Must Die and Queen of the Damned. In August 2001, Aaliyah was in the Bahamas filming the music video for her song Rock the Boat. They had a flight scheduled for the next day, but having finished early, the crew was eager to return to the US and decided to leave early. It would prove to be a fatal decision. The plane was smaller and overloaded. It crashed shortly after takeoff, just a few hundred feet from the runway. Aaliyah died at the site at just 22. The music video was released with the following opening dedication. As we watch this vision of an angel, we will remember her spirit flying free along with the 8 others who were with her. They soar together with our eternal love. Aaliyah 1979 to 2001. Triple X is a 2002 action thriller starring Vin Diesel. Much of the filming took place in Prague. In one action scene, Diesel's character was to rappel down a parasailing line and land on a submarine. Diesel's stunt double in the scene was Harry O'Connor, who had previously done stunts for films like The Perfect Storm and Charlie's Angels. In the parasailing scene in Prague, as Vin Diesel's double, Harry struck the pillar of a bridge and died on impact. He was 44. His resting place is currently unknown. This is Westminster Memorial Park in Orange County, California. Here lies Neil Fredericks. He was a cinematographer, particularly in the horror genre. Perhaps most notably, he was cinematographer for the 1999 cult hit The Blair Witch Project. In August 2004, Neil was filming a movie called Crossbones, about a resurrected cursed pirate who was after his treasure. They were aboard a Cessna getting aerial shots off the coast of Florida when the plane crashed. Although the director, pilot, and 2 other crew members were able to escape, Neil was strapped into his heavy gear in the plane. Unable to free himself, he drowned. Neil was 35. The Dark Knight ranks not only among the greatest Batman movies, but the greatest movies of all time. Lauded particularly for the performance of the late Heath Ledger. The tragedy of the death of Ledger before the movie's release made his winning the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor a bittersweet moment. But Heath's death was not the only tragedy linked to this monumental film.
People are dying.
Conway Wycliffe was a special effects man who worked on films like V for Vendetta, Casino Royale, and Batman Begins. Hired to work on The Dark Knight, Conway was riding in a pickup truck on set, which drove parallel to a stunt Batman tumbler. The truck missed a turn and crashed into a tree, killing Conway at just 41. He is likely laid to rest back in his native New Zealand. The Dark Knight is dedicated both to Heath and Conway. Steve Irwin was film and television's favorite wildlife personality. Born and raised in Australia, Steve gained international fame in the 90s through his TV series The Crocodile Hunter, which also became his nickname. Steve is remembered for his infectious enthusiasm about wildlife education and conservation.
Be remembered for passion and enthusiasm. Conservation is my job, my life, my whole persona. Woo!
They even made a Crocodile Hunter movie.
Crikey! Now that's more like it.
In September 2006, Steve was filming an underwater documentary at the Great Barrier Reef called Ocean's Deadliest. The title would be tragically prescient. While swimming, Steve was approached by a stingray, which stabbed him several times in the chest with its barbed tail. At first he believed it had only punctured his lung, but the stingray had pierced his heart, causing him to bleed to death. Steve was 44. While the incident was captured on camera during the filming of the documentary, the footage was not included, nor has it been released to the public. Steve was laid to rest at the Australia Zoo, which his family owns and operates, in an undisclosed location. Ocean's Deadliest is dedicated to the memory of Steve. Sarah Jones was a young woman just getting her start in the movies. She worked as a camera assistant on a number of productions, including The Vampire Diaries and Playing Burton. In 2014, she was working on location in Georgia on the film Midnight Rider. They were on an active railroad trestle bridge over the Altamaha River. As they were filming, a freight train came around the curve, giving the cast and crew less than a minute to evacuate the bridge. They attempted to remove camera equipment and a prop bed frame from the tracks. Some of the crew were unable to clear the tracks before the train arrived, including Sarah, who was struck and killed at just 27. An investigation revealed that the filmmakers had been denied permission to film on the trestle. Midnight Rider was eventually scrapped, and years of legal actions against the filmmakers would follow. The incident also inspired the Safety for Sarah movement, urging increased awareness and attention to safety issues in film and television productions. Sarah is laid to rest at Nazareth Lutheran Church Cemetery in her native South Carolina. In view of the Birth of Liberty mosaic at Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills is the grave of Alan Purwin. He was a pilot in the movies, specifically a helicopter pilot. He flew in well over 100 films, including Pearl Harbor, Transformers, Jurassic Park, Air Force One, The Fast and the Furious, and many more. His final film was 2017's American Made, starring Tom Cruise. On the last day of filming in 2015, the small twin-engine plane he was aboard on location in Colombia crashed in foggy conditions in the Andes. Alan was 54. Tributes poured in for Alan, many in the industry describing him as the greatest pilot in the movies. Deadpool 2 was the 2018 sequel to the popular 2016 film starring Ryan Reynolds. Hired as a stuntwoman on the film was motorcyclist Sequana Joy Harris. She began her career as a motorcycle racer, competing in AMA-sanctioned races.
Domino, I'm lucky.
She took her talents on two wheels to the movies, performing as Zazie Beetz' stunt double in Deadpool 2. In August 2017, she was driving a motorcycle without a helmet in downtown Vancouver. She lost control of the bike, hit a curb, and was thrown into Rogers Tower. Harris died at the scene at the age of 40. Her resting place is currently unknown. Deadpool 2 is dedicated to her memory. This is All Saints Mausoleum in New Orleans, Louisiana. John Bernecker was an actor and stuntman who performed in close to 100 film and television productions, including Goosebumps, Logan, Black Panther, and more. In 2017, John was in Atlanta working on the popular zombie series The Walking Dead as a stuntman. While rehearsing a stunt, John fell 20 feet onto a concrete floor, missing the safety pad by inches. He sustained head injuries, to which he would succumb the following day. John was 33. The Season 8 episode of The Walking Dead titled Mercy was dedicated to the memory of John Bernecker, along with a dedication to George A. Romero, who had also just died.
We've already won!
At Hollywood Forever Cemetery, next to the lake, we remember one of the more recent tragic instances of death on a movie set. Here lies Helena Hutchins. She was a cinematographer, also known as the director of photography. In 2021, she was working on the set of the film Rust when tragedy struck, echoes of Brandon Lee some 28 years earlier. Actor Alec Baldwin was handed a prop gun, and while preparing for the scene, practicing draws, the gun discharged, striking director Joel Souza and Helena Hutchins. Joel survived, but Helena died while being transferred to the hospital at just 42. Her family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, which was later settled. The The first AD pled guilty to negligent use of a deadly weapon. Baldwin was charged with involuntary manslaughter, but the charges were later dropped. The movie armorer, the person in charge of all the prop guns and their safety, was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 18 months in prison. The incident sparked calls for gun safety reform on movie sets, and calls to never use real ammunition and functional firearms in movies. Despite the tragedy, Helena's family is encouraging people to see Rust, calling her work stunning, and wanting her to be remembered for her talent, rather than for how she died. In 2025, Hulu released a documentary about Helena titled Last Take, Rust and the Story of Helena. And that concludes our tour. Who else do you remember who lost their lives in the pursuit of entertainment? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more famous grave tours. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.